From here to the stars, I am your host, Stephen Euin Cobb. Our guest today is Dr. Michael Nayak. Dr. Nayak is a scientist, engineer, futurist, novelist, and was a U.S. Air Force test pilot. His doctorate is in planetary science from the University of California. He is currently a program director at DARPA. He graduated from the U.S. Air Force Test Pilot School, flew an X-plane, has over 1,000 hours of flight time in more than 40 types of aircraft, and was a semifinalist for the 2021 astronaut class. He was research section chief for the DoD's largest telescope, was a space shuttle engineer, was a planetary scientist at NASA Ames, and he deployed to the South Pole as a U.S. Antarctic Program Principal Investigator. He is a skydiving instructor, and in his free time, writes science fiction, horror, and thrillers. Thank you, Doctor, for taking the time for this interview.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. It's nice to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, well, me too. Let's see. A buddy of mine here at IRG, Les Johnson, in suggesting that I interview you, called you Orbit, not once, but several times. How did you get that nickname?
So, in the flying world, typically everybody has a call sign. Sometimes, in fact, I don't even remember people's real names. I just have to go by their call sign. But usually it's given to you, never chosen. And so usually it denotes something, silly that you once did, as well as something that, you can explain to your mom.
Okay.
Or is my chosen call sign.
Okay. Apparently it means a lot to Les because he used that like 4 or 5 times before I ever heard your name.
That's actually fairly typical. Like I said, people sometimes don't know the real name of somebody with a call sign, right?
Okay. With the increasing focus on lunar activities, you're also interested in problems facing the rapid proliferation of people and materials on the lunar surface. From DARPA's perspective, what are some of the key challenges this rapid expansion presents that you seek to address?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a fantastic question because that's kind of where my brain has been for the last 2 years at DARPA. So I founded the DoD's first dedicated lunar research program, and it was called Luna 10. Which stands for 10-year lunar architecture. And the basic idea was NASA has its mission of science and exploration when it comes to the moon. I think that's fantastic. And they have a very clear direction in which they want to go. However, we live in a world where, the barrier to entry for space is rapidly lowering. And so there are all of these, there's this growing ecosystem of private commercial companies that are now also interested in going to the moon, but they're going to the moon for fundamentally different reasons, right, than the government, than NASA. And so the DARPA question was really, we work with private industry quite a bit. We've got, sort of non-traditional acquisition things that we do, ways to catalyze. In fact, I would argue the whole agency of DARPA really exists to just catalyze the technology area, and then we step back and go do something else and let smart people do what they do. And so the big question I wanted to address with Luna 10 was, could we actually catalyze a self-sustaining lunar economy? So if you think about NASA, right, they are doing a lot of these similar things, but it's very scoped to their missions. And so, they don't have any excess power, right? That's because they bring the amount of power they need. They don't have any excess logistics because they bring the logistics they need. In fact, anything more really would be a waste of our taxpayer dollars. And so the question is, there is some surplus that commercial partners would like, and could the existence of space infrastructure on the moon maybe create our first off-planet economy? That was sort of the big DARPA question. We just released last month, published by Air University Press, a book called the Field Guide to the Commercial Lunar Economy, a vision for industry on the moon in the next decade. So the 10-year lunar architecture refers to 10 years from today, 2035. So this is not futuristic technology. This is technology that exists that you and I are familiar with. And how could we use that? So all the results were published in this book. Actually, if you just Google Lunar Field Guide Air University, there's a free PDF that you can download. And that sort of is broken up into 3 main categories. The first category is kind of a summary of where we've been in this, basically what I just said, which is that this is, NASA has its objectives, private industry has its objectives, and we're trying to see if we can, create a self-sustaining lunar economy. The second part of the book is what are all of the services that would be bought and sold? If it's a commercial economy, then what is the currency? What are we doing there? So there's, we explored under the program, I would say almost every service that you could imagine could be monetized. Power, communications, data, navigation, logistics, construction, mining, transportation, market economics that underlies all of that. So the second book of the second part of the book is a detailed technical level analysis done by industry leading companies to nail down each of those specifics. And then the third part of the book is, we're engineers and scientists. We love hard technical problems, but this is an economic problem. So what are the external perspectives that we should consider outside just technology? So the third part of the book is economics, it's safety, air traffic control, so space traffic control, it's space insurance, for example, space law, policy, interoperability, all of these things that could very well kill a private company enterprise while it's in the womb. And so what do we need to do to solve those problems that are not technical problems? They need to go together. So all of that work from Luna 10 is published, open, and my hope is that folks will read that book and engage and figure out all of the ways in which we were wrong and take what we've done correctly and move that forward.
Okay, and where can they find that?
Yeah, so it's on Air University Press. So actually, if you just Google Lunar Economy Field Guide, if you add Air University Press, it's the first link. But Lunar Economy Field Guide should get you there. And that is a free PDF. It's 300 pages of technical analysis from 130 co-authors. I'm the compiling editor. 130 co-authors, 46 organizations, right? So this is not, I would say this is not an opinion. These are, industry leaders that have thought about these questions very carefully in collaboration with DARPA under the DARPA program. And those are the results.
Wow, excellent.
Yeah. So my hope is that, folks will say, okay, so this is the art of the possible. Now, what do we need to do to make it real?
Among your research interests at DARPA, you list radically innovative solutions to modern optical detection problems. What kind of challenges are you seeing in optical detection today, and how do you envision these innovative solutions addressing them?
Yeah, so we've had telescopes for a while, as you know, and the fundamental problem is one of cost versus aperture. So actually, especially when we're talking about interstellar research and things like that, we need to look to distances that we simply haven't looked to before, huge distances. And so resolution is everything, which means aperture size is everything. The problem is if you plot cost versus aperture size, meaning telescope size, essentially, it's not exponential, but it's not linear either. Which means, so for example, you can buy a 1 meter telescope for fairly cheap, but if you want to go up to 3 million, now it's about 10 times as expensive, and if you want to go to 10 meters, then it's about 120 times as expensive. And so the idea, and it goes up from there. So fundamentally, we are limited in our ability to look farther by just the cost and technical complexity of optical telescopes. This is actually a really big problem, I think, because, okay, let's say I want to have an 8 meter telescope, which is, we're not even at the world's largest yet. There's only one facility in the United States that can build a glass aperture that is that big. If you want to go to 10 meters, that is a custom build. If you want to do larger than 10 meters, you actually have to build a facility to do that. And we don't even have that. So the question is, and then, oh, by the way, there's a whole nother level of complexity if you want to take these mirrors above the atmosphere into space. And James Webb Telescope, Space Telescope is a fantastic example of that. Truly amazing piece of engineering. Wow. But, several years behind schedule and several billions of dollars. And so can we break that paradigm is the question. That's what I'm interested in. And so at DARPA, I've started a program called Zenith. It's actually ongoing right now. And the elevator pitch is that glass is always going to suffer from this problem, which is that the larger it gets, the more exponentially expensive it gets. And so what are some other alternatives? And so the analogy I'd like to use is one of looking into a reflection, right? If you look into a lake, you see a reflection. It's not bad. It's not a great image, right? But there's some aberrations there that need to be corrected, but it's pretty darn good. And so could we use liquid mirror telescopes. And the idea is that liquid will be far more scalable, right? I can build a 30-meter aperture by simply, flowing a gallon of liquid out across the dish.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is not a new idea. People have actually tried this in the past. We have built 3-meter liquid mirror telescopes, if you can believe that. The problem is to create a light focusing shape. So the way that we create that with liquid mirror telescopes is we spin them. The problem is that's not a very scalable solution. So now I've solved the problem of the large liquid surface, but I need a larger and larger and larger torque motor to keep that thing spinning. So the key trick of Zenith is looking at whether or not we can build very large aperture liquid mirror telescopes that don't need to be spun. So using magnetic forces to hold them to the surface. So that's kind of the goal is can we get to just, unprecedented sizes of telescopes using liquids? It's a very hard materials problem.
How far along is this project? That is it still in the brainstorming stage, or have you begun experiments in simulation with physical equipment?
Fantastic question. I'm glad you asked. Yes, we are well underway. The project has actually been ongoing for about 2 years. So we started about 2 months ago. We had an initial concept design phase with 4 great companies. And then we moved on, so advanced 2 of the ideas. They are currently working toward a critical design review. They have subscale demo units of controllable liquid mirrors that don't rotate. Which, by the way, the Zenith name comes from the fact that when a liquid mirror is rotating, it can only look straight up, right, to Zenith, because the second that you tilt that mirror, that spinning mirror off axis, that liquid just sloshes right out. So our goal is to get the liquid to be able to tilt and tip and slew and do all of that against gravity while kind of remaining compelled to stay by magnetic force. So that program is well underway. 2 years. We have subscale demos that are being built right now, and then the goal of the program is to get to a critical design review to see if we can build a 0.5 meter large scale liquid mirror telescope that doesn't spin. And that's a very challenging problem if you think about it, because 0.5 meter, but we are asking for visible wavelength. We're asking for nanometer scale control across hundreds of centimeters, and then later across thousands of centimeters. So it's actually a 6 order of magnitude problem. But it's well underway. I'm excited to see what these 2 teams that remain in the program are capable of doing.
Yeah, I've never ground my own mirror. I considered it at one point, but I've never actually done it. But I know, man, you've got to be super fine on that.
Right, nanometer. Yeah, that's exactly right. Because you got to polish that mirror down to the nanometer scale. That is not easy to do. Liquids naturally lie at the nanometer scale. Now they don't when you're tipping and tilting and sloshing them around. So that's the problem that we got to solve.
And apparently, and it's explicit in your description, which I found at DARPA, that the ultimate goal, is to be able to take these into 0G, into orbit, so that you're making these mirrors, liquid mirrors, in orbit, and they hold position, hold shape.
That's the ultimate goal. And the key, right? That's why I think that Zenith goal is so important. If you've got a bunch of spinning apertures right next to each other, as you can imagine, right, that's going to create it's going to be like a wave pool. And so we don't want that. We actually want it lying flat, and then we can have multiple segments, and build out something like, the ultimate goal would be to build something like James Webb, but for a fraction of the costs, and really hopefully get bigger than that. But yeah, space is the ultimate goal. Ground-based telescopes, we have access to a lot of things like power and the ability to just go up and test the thing. But the atmosphere, of course, is a huge aberration causer. And so, getting above the atmosphere and looking into deep space. I'm an astrophysicist by background, planetary scientist by background. So that's where my heart is at. Let's get to imaging the stars.
And what is the real difficulty to be overcome? Is it the controlling the magnetic fields, or finding the liquid, or what is?
Yeah, it's sort of it's a twofold problem. It is an electromagnetic problem in that. Okay, so big picture, right? If you imagine something that is sloshing around, if you can see those waves, that is kind of hundreds of thousands larger than nanometer control. So you and I are seeing right now in something like 500 nanometers. of vision. So we need to get to sub-nanometer control to actually get sharp images. So if it's sloshing around, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of waves, so you got to suppress those waves. Okay, that gets you down to the hundreds of waves scale. Then you need a whole nother solution to get from 100 waves. So these are like minor sort of coma and things that more prescription lenses have to deal with. That it's a whole nother solution to get from 100 waves to one wave of error. So we're talking kind of 550 nanometers of error. And then we got to get smaller than that. We got to get to lambda over 6. So if we're 550 nanometers, I'm looking for something that is of order 80 nanometers of error. So, and this is while the whole dish, the big dish that's on half a meter scale and later, tens of meter scales, is moving like visibly, right? So I'm physically perturbing the dish by hundreds of thousands of waves and simultaneously requiring the liquid to stay in place to, tens of nanometers. So that balance means, multiple levels of field control. But every level of magnetic field control you add, right, there's a little bit of a counter. And so it's a very high bandwidth control loop to say, look at the error that the mirror is causing as it moves unpredictably to acquire a star target and then track it. So it's got to apply a different magnetic force, and then the telescope starts to move. So the force vector has got to change fast enough that it can maintain tens of nanometers. So you're talking about, a control loop that's very complex. So it's materials challenge. Yeah. So we have 3 layers to answer your question. There's the materials challenge of something that is so responsive to a magnetic field, yet so damped that it doesn't, have a big oscillatory response. You've got the kind of control loop that needs to run very quickly to hold the image in place. And then you've got all of the manufacturing challenges that come with taking something that's got to be nanometer scale control and then scale it to, tens of thousands of components. Mm-hmm. So it's a great challenge. It's a really DARPA hard challenge.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah. Could you describe from your perspective as a program manager the process of identifying a new program or technology that DARPA should invest in?
Yeah, and I'd be happy to share an example of this with the audience. But the key thing that we're looking for is a white space chart. So let me explain. The kind of core mission of DARPA is to make big bets. So if you can see a logical, a clear but difficult way in which to solve a problem, kind of DARPA stance is great. Then you should solve it. But if it's something big, like if we succeed, this is so hard. But if we succeed, it will make a generational change. Then, that's kind of the fundamental thesis of every DARPA program. And so to create that, I'm looking for technology white space. And so typically, since we just spent all this time talking about Zenith, right, my white space chart looks like cost versus diameter, right? And that's a fairly not quite exponential, but a non-linear line that scales upward. And then I want to be able to show, hey, we can't seem to get to this part of the technology white space where we have low cost and large aperture. Like that part of the white space is fundamentally inaccessible to us. So what's a program that we can start that would let us get there? Okay, so that's sort of the dream, right? That's the white, that tells us, okay, this is a DARPA hard problem. The next step is, okay, do we have some idea of how we're going to solve this? So, the example I like to give here is teleportation. Wow, okay, there's a great white space I can draw for teleportation. Like, yeah, I'm going to, we've got all the airplanes and the rockets over here in this corner. And if I could just, beam myself at the speed of light, then here I go. I'm in this. So very definitely a DARPA impact, but I don't have like a physics solution that could solve the problem. So it's sort of the pairing between there's this huge impact that we can make if we can solve the problem. And the program manager thinks that I need to have at least one way that I can show with some back of the envelope simulations is possible. Once we determine that, assuming that it is both a big problem and there's some high risk way to solve it, then we, put the solicitation out to industry, to smart folks like yourselves and others who can hopefully help us think of other ways, and then we build out a portfolio. But the key is, with every DARPA program that gets launched, it's worth saying that a program manager has thought of at least one way in which the program could be solved. I actually get this a lot. People will come to my industry days and say, we don't think this problem can be done. And it's like, oh, there's at least one way. There's at least one.
Okay.
That doesn't mean it'll work, but we have at least an idea.
If you were to imagine the ultimate liquid telescope, how big is this thing? What is your dream telescope?
Yeah, my dream telescope is what's called an ELT, extremely large telescope. This is actually a class of telescopes greater, 30 meters in diameter or greater. We were considering building the TMT, the 30-meter telescope, and this would have been sort of the first ELT class telescope. That was going to be in Hawaii. There were some issues there. Now they're thinking about moving it to the Canary Islands. But 30 meters or greater, and now that's a ground-based telescope. If we could get something, so one thing to consider is Starship, right? Or just heavy launcher class. We're no longer going to have rocket fairings that are the same size. They're now going to be bigger, which means you can fit bigger stuff and take it to space. So I would love to see 30 to 100 meter class telescopes. And these are things that would allow you, for example, to actually get returns from, planets around Alpha Centauri, the star closest to us, not just the star itself, but actually, a couple of pixels of light from potential planets. That would be my goal. Okay. I think we're probably a half a generation away from that, but hopefully Zenith is a good start.
Is there an upper limit to liquid-shaped telescopes?
In theory, no. In reality, yes. So one limit would be the size of a rocket fairing. The way we have traditionally gotten around that for James Webb, for example, are these segmented telescopes that, unfold. So we can beat that problem. I think it's really just a cost and a will problem. At some point, even liquid mirrors in space are going to get expensive. And so I think it's a fundamental question of how well can we drive the cost scaling? How far, in other words, how far can we push the Zenith hypothesis before something gets cost ineffective to scale? So, for a standard telescope, it's glass. For a spinning liquid telescope, it's the torque motor that keeps it spinning. I don't know because, we're sort of targeting the first step, which is a half a meter. Still gets us to the fundamental technical questions that will apply to larger telescopes. But that's more of a manufacturing question. If I had to guess, it's going to be something related to the control loop, right? The larger the telescope gets, the more, right? So now it's, I just talked about half a meter to sub lambda, sub wavelength control is 100,000x. Actually, it's more than that. It's 6 orders of magnitude. When you take the scale of the telescope from 0.5 meters to say 50 meters, now it's 8 orders of magnitude. And so with every order of magnitude that you seek, you are driving the cost by at least an order of magnitude, probably more. And so where that starts to get nonlinear, we don't know yet, but my guess is that, it's probably going to be around the 30 to 50 meter size, if we're lucky. Again, that's a hypothesis. Okay. A lot of DARPA hypotheses, when the pedal gets to the metal, don't pan out, but we learned something. That's the goal.
Yeah. For budding scientists and engineers looking to make a significant impact on national security and technical advancement, based on your experience as a program manager, what advice would you give about working with or for an organization like DARPA?
Yes, this is a terrific question. I'm actually really passionate about this. I think DARPA is such a unique place because of the way that it formulates problems. I think it challenges you to think in a completely different dimension, right? Which is how not to play it safe, but technologically plausible. That's a very interesting thing where we're not looking for the easy answer. The problems are designed such that it's not a straightforward solution, but it's also not impossible. So I would say for people that are interested in working with DARPA, there's 2 big things that you got to know. And the first is that we want you to dream big and bet big, which is that failure should be part of your model, right? So if you're seeking to work on a DARPA project and you're proposing something that's very color by numbers, like, yeah, we'll do 1, then we'll do 2, we'll beat all the risk out of 3, and then we'll do a bunch of options for 4, that's not a good fit for our methodology. Is more bet big, prove a core hypothesis, and then we'll work with partners to really develop that hypothesis. So sometimes folks that have a kind of product mentality, like I'm going to build this thing, it is going to be a beautiful engineering work. Perhaps that's not a good fit, because we want you to be trying all kinds of things. We're looking for that high risk, high reward technical solution that really just bends the curve of what's possible. So I think if you're thinking about working with DARPA, come with that bet. There's really nowhere else that you can do it. So, why not embrace that attitude? If you're working with DARPA, bring it to your technical work. And we're always looking to skirt the edge of the possible. Every program, we should be learning something and hopefully failing, and then, figuring out where to go next. If you're aiming to work at DARPA as a program manager, I love this topic. I think it's a truly high impact job. I also can't remember the last time I slept for more than 4 hours a night. So, it's a high bandwidth job. So just, I would say, as a former boss of mine used to say, giddy up.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Doctor. I appreciate you taking the time for the interview. It's great stuff.
Thanks so much, Steve. It's been a pleasure to chat with you. Till next time.
That was Dr. Michael Nayak. This has been From Here to the Stars, a video series created by the Interstellar Research Group. The IRG is a non-profit organization dedicated to thoroughly exploring the science and engineering that can eventually open up the reality of interstellar travel. Join us October 12 to 15, 2025 in Austin, Texas for the Interstellar Research Group's 9th Interstellar Symposium. Learn more at irg.space. I have been your host, Stephen Euin Cobb. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, and you can subscribe to our channel for other such videos. On behalf of all of us here at the Interstellar Research Group, I thank you.